Welcome back to Next Chapter. I'm Marty, and this is Jaden. We just finished reading Wind and Truth. This is your spoiler-free and spoiler review of Book 5 of the Stormlight Archive.
So if you're looking for spoilers, check the description. It's right next to the like button and the subscribe button. That's where you'll find the timestamp to go straight to the spoilers section. For now, we want to talk non-spoilers. So if you haven't read the book yet, do not fear. This first part of the review is non-spoiler.
So Jaden, if you are someone new to this book, having read the other books, should you read this book?
I would say prepare yourself. That's what I would say. I would say it's a long, long book. And I think one of the things that I would want to make sure I convey to people is like, what have you read before this? I'd want to get to feel out this person, because there are definitely some people that I would say no, and some people that I would say yes.
Even if they've read the first 4 books of
that. So that's one of the biggest things. Like if someone just wants to jump in, and I've had people ask me this for some series, like, oh, I heard this one's the best in the series. Can I just read that one? That does happen.
Wow.
So in that case, I would say no. If you have read the first 4, I think that puts you in a category to yes, you will want to read this. You will want to cap off the series with this book. But just because it has a ton of hype does not mean you should read it on its own. Beware.
Yes.
Don't do that.
It is a series. Do not skip the first 4 books. It's very good.
Yeah.
But I agree with you. It's still a must read for the Stormlight Archive.
If you're a Stormlight Archive fan already, it's a must read.
Yes. You get some conclusion. This book, I would say, overall, does not hit like the other books. And just so you know, there's a lot of hype that went into this book on it's a conclusion of a series and a conclusion of an arc.
The biggest arc and the biggest series that Sanderson has written. So
yes, and we won't go into like how it does on that conclusion and everything. Read the book and then come back, find out what we thought on that.
Yep.
But it didn't quite deliver the way I was hoping for this book. And
absolutely.
That was very disappointing for me and definitely affected my perception.
And I think one of the things that becomes that for me was you just feel how long it is.
Yes.
Like in most of the books, when you start getting to the end, you'll hear the Sanderlanche, it's a big term, is you're just like, wow, it just feels like it's sped by, even though it was, 60 hours or 1,200 pages. You're just like, oh man, I just can't wait to finish this book. You feel the length of Wind and Truth a lot more.
Yes.
It is longer, but also I think because of, maybe it was how it was written, maybe it's just differences in the storyline, but you do feel the length.
You'll have to tell me if you felt the same way. I felt like I kept on reaching for other podcasts or things to listen to. I listened to my books. And it was hard to get back into it, was it not?
It is hard to dive back in. Yeah, I think one of the things that Sanderson, again, is famous for is like his multi-perspective writing.
Yes.
Like that's very common in his books. And I think that was one thing that he did a lot of in this book.
Yes.
There's a lot of perspective switching. So
and
be ready for that, and that makes it hard to get back into.
And honestly was one of the reasons why this book struggled for me. This book had switched perspectives so quickly and on several times within one chapter, and every single time you knew it was coming. Right as something exciting was about to happen, it would switch. But guess what? Sometimes you thought the exciting thing was about to happen, then it would switch. And then it'd switch back, and you're like, nope, that hadn't happened yet. So it builds up, and then, oh, now it's finally happened. Nope. Then it switches, and then
brutal side of
kept on
cliffhangers.
doing that over and over again. And like, there's a point where like I understand that makes sense. You're trying to keep the momentum of a book and like keep them reading.
Yeah.
But like, he was not like that in the other books. He did have the cuts and everything, but they made a lot more sense, and it wasn't like as jarring.
Yeah,
me.
I totally see what you mean. And one, if you're watching this video and you're thinking, wow, well, I definitely shouldn't read that book because they hated it. We actually did. We did enjoy the book.
Yes.
As an overall. We did enjoy the series, Stormlight Archive, I think, as a concluding book. And one thing I want to say for a positive note, for those of you who are like maybe on the fence and leaning one direction or another, is it does conclude a lot of things that you've been asking about. If you've been reading the Stormlight Archive and you're thinking, oh, there are so many questions in my mind, a lot of those do get answered. So from the perspective of it's a 5th book, but it's kind of the 5th of 10, but 1 through 5 are their own arc, it does answer a lot of questions. So whether or not you think that it's going to end the series and it's going to be a good end, I do think if you're looking for a lot of answers, you will find a lot of them in Wind and Truth. And that was something that I did appreciate. So I will say, keep that in mind.
It's an answers book, which is great.
Yeah, that's a good way to put
Another thing that I really enjoyed about this book, talk about some things that I liked.
It's a good way to go.
All negative. There's a reason why I still recommend this book to people. There are some really good character arcs in here. Some of them are not so good, but there are some that you will really enjoy. And again, Sanderson in some places has that classic part of like finding some good character depth. But again, what brings it down is there are a lot of parts that like he doesn't quite reach that same character depth that he has in the past.
And it does bring you to a bigger sense of the Cosmere, I think. Compared to the other 4 Stormlight books, it does a much better job of saying like there's a big wide Cosmere out there and there's a lot going on. And I think that this actually unlocks a lot of that. We were talking before in a spoiler non-podcast discussion that we really appreciated what it kind of unlocks at the end. Like it's a conclusion and an answers book, but it also leaves you with the perspective of, man, I could see them writing 5 more books about what could potentially happen in the future. So it does have a fair amount of conclusion, a fair amount of answers and that part of it. But there's also, this ending of there could be so much more.
Fair warning, I did see a lot of comments on the internet on what this was, and I completely agree with them, is that Sanderson very much pitched this as a conclusion to the first arc of the Stormlight, and it does not feel as much of a conclusion as a middle book, a book 5 out of 10 instead of like a first story arc out of 10.
So kind of go into it with the expectation that it's more of a 5 out of 10 than a 5 of 5. As far as like conclusion of a book.
Yes. And in a series number.
Yes. Yeah. I made that connection just now. Book 5 of book 10 or book 5 of book 5.
Yes.
That's a better. That's horrible.
We did not give it a 5 out of 10.
Oh, well. Yeah, I think it's definitely one that you want to read going into it with the eyes wide open of knowing that it's long, that you're going to get a lot of answers, but you're going to work for those answers along the way.
Yes. So read the book, watch our recap on the rhythm of war before you read the book so you can remember and get caught up for the book. I think that'll help you a lot. And then once you've read it, we'll be into our spoiler section starting right now, and we'll see you there. So jump into the spoiler section. We're headed there now.
This is your final warning. We are about to start the spoiler section of this video. From here on out, if you have not read Wind and Truth, it is not my fault or Marty's fault if you learned something that you didn't want to know about the book. So here we go, spoiler section.
Yes. Biggest part for me, spoiler section. The characters, as I alluded to in the beginning, were not his strongest aspect of his writing this time. Mm-hmm. In all of his writing, I love his character development. You can connect with them. They feel deep. They feel just on point. And you can I love everything about them. I really love what Richard and Austin said in their review of Wind and
Ramble.
Truth.
If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out.
Thank you for getting their podcast name
Absolutely.
out there. He put it really well, and I felt the exact same way, is that the characters felt way too self-aware at times.
I get that.
There were moments when Shallan would say like, I feel this depressed thing and this is kind of working for me and everything, but it doesn't work for everyone I know, but like it's okay. And it's just like, okay, like most people in the world do not have very self-aware thoughts.
Talk like that.
Yes. And characters are more exciting when they have conflict. And conflict is what pushes stories forward. So whether that's conflict,
character consistency is a very important part of that.
Yes. Conflict with themselves, conflict with other characters. Yeah. That's what pushes it forward. And it felt like he was killing the conflict with those comments because he was just trying to bring in, I don't know.
Too lukewarm on a lot of those takes. Yeah, when some people are controversial. Some characters are controversial and you know that going in and you're not like, oh, I can't believe that person. You're like, that's them. That's their own personality and they're learning and growing, but you don't get that chance.
Well, and that's the best part about reading books, right? Is that you're able to see from people's perspectives that even have incorrect perspectives. Even if they're good characters or bad characters or whatever, you're learning from their mistakes.
And it's supposed to be the opportunity to see people that do things that you would never have done, or like you think like that is a terrible decision, you're wrong, I can't believe this person's horrible, and maybe you learn a little something about another perspective. Maybe you're like, oh my goodness, like that actually ended up kind of working out for them, learning about the entire arc of a character. You see so much more, you understand so much more, and it's not because every character in the book agrees with whatever you were thinking or they would react in the exact same way in a certain situation. Like you kind of want characters that conflict with each other for that reason. Absolutely.
Sure. I will say my favorite character throughout the entire book, though, was Adolin in this book.
I would agree with that.
Adolin was absolutely nailed through this book. I loved all of his conversations with the King of Azamir and how they were playing towers together and how they was teaching him how to work and plate. And then finally the end of like how they're all fighting with the the unoathed and everything. It was just such an exciting moment. And honestly, that moment too, when he's fighting in all of despair, it was the classic Sanderson put you in despair moment of when he's fighting with the spear and like he's trading and it's like he has his own Bridge 4 moment. It was like he just feels like he's going through the worst of it.
And he's willing to do it. He's willing to put everything he has to his dying breath into that moment because he cares. And he's willing to fight in someone else's land for someone else's territory because he truly cares. And I just think that represents so much of what his characters become over 4 books. And you're like, yes, that is Adolin. That right there.
Yes, I absolutely loved it. He nailed the character development there. I will say even the part when the unoathed all come together and get their shard plate and the shard swords and blades and everything, it gave me chills. It was one of those moments like, this is such a cool, like a moment where everything's coming together and like they're able to turn things around when it was again a moment where it felt like there was no way out for them and they were going to die. I thought Adolin was going to die a few times.
Absolutely.
Which was great. He really sold it.
That unoathed part for me needed like a culminating one line of power from Sanderson, and it didn't really get one. I feel like that kind of fizzled into and yeah, everyone really liked him, and the unoathed had a lot of responsibilities in the town, and they had a lot of respect.
Yell, "I'm your therapist." His therapist.
Gosh, it hurts me inside. But no, I do think he could have had like a crowning, because there are a lot of quotes that I just remember. You know, it's like, "Honor is dead, but I'll see what I can do." Like that will get you every time.
So good.
And that's a moment where you're like, he didn't have to say anything, but he did. And that's what, like, it really just put that extra emphasis. So that's one thing. I do think Adolin was great. We have to talk about like Kaladin and Zeth from a perspective of the payoff of that fight is something I was so excited for.
Yes.
The final fight with all of the honor bearers, with all of the surges, even some we haven't even seen before. And you just get nothing out of it. Everything just kind of, and I think the way I described it before was you get to this point where instead of them rising to the occasion and becoming better versions of themselves and just taking on a new challenge, the challenge just kind of got easier at the end. You're like, that is not how you win. That's not how a hero is supposed to win. Like, oh, Nail's just going to all of a sudden not be powerful anymore. He's going to kind of just give up. Like, he clearly had way more power than Kaladin, and Kaladin should have like found a way to win, and his way to win was just kind of to mess with Nail's mind.
Sanderson is known for this, of always finding a way to win, even with like an odd, a very creative way of doing it. Like I listen to a lot of Sanderson podcasts, and he talks about how that's what he loved doing when he played Dungeons and Dragons growing up, is he would create characters that were like so weird and had really odd skills, but then he would end up using them to like be super advantageous. And you can see him using that in his books.
Yep.
Is that he's able to turn these things that don't seem like an advantage into something like, wow, this is the greatest thing in the world.
And that wow moment you're expecting instead of I guess. I mean, that worked, but it just doesn't seem either realistic or exciting.
Yes. And in all these books, all 4 of these, it's been building up. Kaladin was the wind. And
exactly.
And we never got that moment of him like being the wind again. And like it was just killing me. Like they really leaned into therapist Kaladin in this book.
I don't like it.
And I'm just not a fan. Like, you can do therapist Kaladin, but like let him still be the warrior at the same time.
And the reason he's a good therapist is because he understands and he knows and he's been there. He's not just like, oh, he's all of a sudden an expert in therapy. He just knows because he was a warrior. And he had battle shock, and he had to go through that himself, and he's helping guide other people through it. I don't think he's just their therapist. He's just someone who knows what it's like, and he's able to help them through it because of that. And I think transforming that, and it's like, oh yeah, what he does now is this. He's built his persona over 4,000 or 5,000 pages of like, he is up to any challenge if it means trying to protect someone, and he will do anything he has to do, up to like giving his own self to make it work, to save someone else's life. And I feel like turning that into like, oh yeah, he just really cares about people and he kind of just talks to them and stuff. It really feels like it levels down his potential. And it makes no sense to me when you could have put that in a perspective of he's doing this from a position of power instead of feeling like he's kind of giving up on his story.
Yes, I completely agree with that.
Crazy. It's crazy to see, but it's like, oh.
I know, it was so frustrating. But I will say, I did love the part where they decided to make Kaladin a herald.
Oh, yeah. I like heralds
very
overall.
Well.
Yeah, the heralds in general were probably the best part of learning this book, because the answers that we talked about this in the non-spoiler section, but so many good answers, so many good storylines, learning about the heralds, how the Oath Pact was made, what the Cosmere people have been doing, what Wit's been up to, like all these new learnings and talking about the dragons and all. It's
the Cosmere connections were great.
They did a great job of bringing all those together and going through those. Maybe a little bit too tell, don't show in many cases.
Yes.
But I do think that it was still good to get those answers I needed.
It was really weird to see that happen in this book for Sanderson, because I've complimented him a lot in his previous books that how he's so good at a show not tell.
Yep.
But this was very much not that way in this book.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe there was just too much to put into it because there were a lot of answers there. But that was kind of my overarching feeling on the book before we get into like ratings and final ratings, is like the payoffs weren't there as much. The answers were good, but they were just too quickly thrown in and not shown. Well, maybe my two things.
And we can't forget to talk about the Battle of Champions as
100%.
well.
Yeah, that's kind of the whole.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
But I would agree with that. And part of me kind of wonders if that's because Sanderson was trying to like do something cool in his mind, like I'm going to write this massive book in only 10 days. Like it's going to be over the course of 10 days is like what it's going to be.
It took him a long time to write it.
It took him more like 3 years to write it, but like the events happen over 10 days. And I kind of wonder if that's one of the reasons why it just didn't work. Like he tried something cool.
He couldn't match his same style.
Yeah, and so I don't know if that would have worked. It would have been great if he had concluded it more at the beginning, like the Battle of Champions sooner, and then did more afterwards. I don't know. The whole 10-day thing, I think, made it feel long, because now you're starting to go through every single moment of the day.
There's too many details. You're checking your watch just like they are.
Okay, like
it's like real time. Like if you're reading this book slow enough.
And you have boring parts in your normal days, like all the time. And you're like, now you're experiencing with these fictional characters. Like, I don't need to experience their boring parts of their days.
But how did you feel about the Contest of Champions, the build up to the end?
Yeah, it was fine for me. I loved that Dalinar became Honor. I kind of wish that he stayed Honor for longer. I thought he was a perfect Honor. He did really great. I did kind of think that Adolin would become Honor at one point.
There was a sneaking suspicion.
There was. But I thought that was cool. The Contest of Champions, though, was not near as exciting as I thought it should be.
You mean the Conversation of Champions?
The Conversation of Champions.
Let's be honest.
Yes.
Is that was my
give me your take on it.
And that is my take. I'm like, this confrontation that everyone's been preparing for, doing all this stuff, it turned into like I don't know, Dalinar, you pick. You choose if you win or lose. And I've been training this guy for 20 years to hate you, and he's actually not going to do anything. He's just kind of frozen in place. So you do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I just felt like it was a twist, but it was a twist into a weird direction that I was like, it doesn't get me emotionally invested in this story. I'm kind of more like, oh, what are they doing over in Shinovar? Like this will kind of just wrap up itself. He's not going to kill him. Everybody knows that.
The wind told you that Shinovar was going to be cooler. Like the whole book.
Yeah, it was telling me. Sanderson was telling me. The wind was telling me. Nothing. No, I would agree with that. The other thing with that was just hard for me. Oh no, that I did like with it. I'm going back to what I liked with it, is that I really did like that it was kind of the same ethical dilemma that the Stormfather / Honor had in the beginning, where actually in history, where he was decided to imprison by Mishram. Yes.
And so by doing something wrong in order to make something like overall good happen
potentially.
And so he was presenting him with the same exact problem. Odium was saying like, okay, I'm going to make you do something that's completely against what you believe in order to save your world for a little bit. So I thought that it did have some interesting ethical dilemmas there.
Yeah.
Which I thought were cool. I didn't really like how his meeting where he's just like chatting and like, I'm going to eat bread and I want you to tell me what to do and tell me what the answer is. I'm like, he's just getting angry. I'm like, Dalinar, I feel like is a little bit smarter than that. Like he's not just the dumb like warlord that they were kind of making him out to be.
Yeah. He almost like his character went backwards like 2 books.
It did, didn't it? Like,
but hey, I think overall we have some strong thoughts about it's easier to find maybe those issues that we had because that's the moments that take you out of the book. And the hype for this was absolutely massive. Like that's something I wanted to at least mention in our review is like, this had been hyped. It was the big headliner of Dragonsteel, the hype, and everyone's been reading these books. They knew it was going to come out. Stormlight 5, even like the cover reveal had hype to it. So you got to imagine the book itself, the content, the conclusion, everyone was incredibly excited for.
Yes.
I feel like it ended too lukewarm for me.
Yes, and for me, like I would say overall, it's all about the unspoken promises that Brandon Sanderson makes. It's really interesting because in all of his books, this is the one thing that you can depend on for Brandon Sanderson's book is a Sanderlanche, an absolute Sanderlanche. But a Sanderlanche means that things were built up before and then it starts cascading on itself and coming down like an avalanche does. And so you're reading this book and I know it's long and I know that it feels like slow at times, but it's worth it because by the end of the book, by the time I get there, I'm going to look back at all these slow moments. I'm so glad that they're there because it set it up perfectly for the end.
Yeah.
And I did not get that in this book. And that was heartbreaking. It made the longest book I've ever read in my life feel like, was that worth it? Worth the time to get to this moment?
You don't want to be asking that question.
Oh, it hurts so bad. And so it definitely, it hurts my rating overall. It's still, again, I love Sanderson. I'll be reading his books in the future. That just hurts so bad. There was a time where I'm like, do I want to, will I even read the next 5 books? I was just so disappointed. But by the end,
we will. I'm going
to back it off. But by the end, I did think I'm still a Sanderson fan. I can trust him that I think he was trying to do some things with the 10 days and everything. I'm going to give him some slack for it. He has other books that I wasn't a fan of either, that it wasn't his first book. And so he's made recoveries since then.
Yeah.
And so I believe that he could have a chance to have good books in the future. So needless to say, I'm going to be reading the ones in the future as well. But,
yeah. No, I would agree with that. It did not dissuade me from Sanderson, but I think my experience with Sanderson has led me to come up with these unspoken expectations.
Yes.
And it's hard. I'm sure it's even harder for an author to continue to meet and exceed expectations that continually rise. But from my perspective, there are always going to be moments when you're expecting a certain thing and it doesn't meet those expectations. And we have to be honest about that was our review. Those were our thoughts. And that's where we're at.
And I guess that's the last thing I would say about the unspoken promises too, is every single book you're reading it and it tells you to expect something like a big battle or a big finish or this is going to happen. And Sanderson does that too. But the other thing that he's so good at is twisting that just slightly to give you not what you expected, but something even better or even crazier. So you're still thrown off with a twist, but you love it. So the promise is still kept. And it just felt like the promise wasn't quite kept here. Yes.
Yeah, it missed out on the opportunity to throw you off, but leave you more impressed than you would have been if you just paid it off the way you expected. So yeah, absolutely agree. I think that's something that carries probably deeply into my final review.
Okay, let's hear it, Jaden. What would you rate this book?
So, because I'm not going to do a Goodreads 5 stars, I want
cannot stand those. Get those out of here. 5 stars aren't enough.
My final review for this is going to be a 7.8.
Okay.
And that's where I want to say high 7s, Sanderson book. Sanderson is still a great writer. Really liked it. It is shocking because the other Stormlight Archive books are in the 9s.
Yes,
so
all of them.
It's not only 1 point lower, but multiple points lower. But yeah, my expectations were a big part of that. The payoffs that I didn't get to see, and the parts of the book that I love the most, in my personal opinion of books and what I really enjoy reading, was severely lacking. So it lost a lot of points for me.
Yep, I would agree with that. For me, I ended up at a 7.5, slightly lower than you. I could not connect with the characters in this book, and character development matters so much to me. Character conflict, all of those things. I wanted to know the characters. I wanted to be excited about what they're doing. And it wasn't necessarily the mental health stuff. I really liked that in book 4, even where people complain about Kaladin's too depressed, and I didn't mind. He was going through conflict
because it's real. Yeah,
it's real. And so that was just, it hurt. It did still have a good-ish finish that makes it worth it. I did love the parts with the Adolin. I liked the Yasna scenes where she's confronting her own morality. Mm-hmm. Again, it all comes down to the characters, right? Shallan was interesting with her mother. Zeph loved the backstory, but then again, it just didn't quite hit as it should
pay
have.
off. Absolutely.
Promises not quite met, and so it brings it down to a 7.5. So that's our review on everything. If you want more details, we did a 3-part series on our review of the books as we went through each one. We give a lot more details as we're reading them.
Reacting to the moments as they happen, for sure.
So definitely dive into those if you want to hear more. That's our review for the book.
We're excited to keep reading more and more with you guys. Let us know if there's a book you think we should read next, or if you have specific thoughts on Wind and Truth that you want to share, your review, your reaction, your rating, why we're wrong, why we're right. Lots of interesting conversations can happen down in the comments. It's right there below next to the like and subscribe buttons. We're excited to have you with us, and we will see you in the next chapter.